We're going to call the meeting to order, the Loveland Board of Education work session on Tuesday, October 7th at 6 p.m. It's very official. All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Reverend Eilert, Mrs. Jaranek,
Here.
Mrs. Mangan,
Here.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. All right, our Reverend Eilert is out of town. So our first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a motion for the board to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second. All right, could I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Jaranek,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. All right, thank you. Our next item on the agenda are the minutes from our September 16th board business meeting. The minutes are posted out on board docs. If there are not any questions, I'd like to go ahead and have a motion to approve the September 16th Board of Education business meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. All right, a roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mrs. Jaranek.
Yes. Alrighty, okay, moving right along to the next section is the treasurer's report, and so ask Mr. Espy to go ahead and talk to us about our financial forecast and assumptions.
Thank you, Mrs. Mangan, and members of the board. Happy to go through the new financial forecast. Although a lot of the graphics look the same, the file that I'm actually going to send to the state is abbreviated with less years on it. However, I'm going to be showing you graphics as if it were the 5-year forecast still. First of all, just getting into some of the legalities, the OAC and ORC have been adjusted due to the budget bill. Now, this is due by October 15th, and then the last day of February. Going forward into fiscal year 27, it'll be due by August 31st. And then the last day of February. There's a little bit of pushback because appropriations are not due until the end of September. And so my professional organization is trying to do some work to get that August 31st requirement pushed back to the end of September, just to let you know that that may be happening. Again, when we look at the forecast, we're only looking at the general fund, so we're not looking at federal funds or state funds. Or any of the other funds that we operate, such as the PI or food service. Again, you'll see a lot of the different funds we have. We're just looking at that general fund, the 001. When we look at base costs, this is part of the Fair School Funding Plan, and what it does is it looks at actual costs to the district. Our base costs have gone up a little bit, but most districts have. And this represents the minimum level of services. I always like to talk about this just because it's a huge component of how we're funded and the calculations of how we're funded. Also, this is an interesting stat. This is something put out by the state. It's basically saying that our community is able to support additional funds as we go forward from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 2030. It's not really it's rooted in the federal adjusted gross income and just metrics in terms of the wealth in the district, both property and income. So thought that was an interesting stat. That's something that I showed back in May that I updated for this forecast to continue to show that capacity. When we look at the base cost and then capacity and really what that means for us, we're essentially being funded at 10% is what the state is putting in. If we were to look outside of the guarantee is obviously helping us and skews this number a bit, but I think it's interesting because if we have a typical student, the state would give us 10% of those costs. If we have a gifted students, we get 10%, special education 10%, economic disadvantage 10%. If you think students can fall into multiple categories, right? So the way that the state funding formula is set up, it's set up to continually ask our local community to pay 90%. And one of the questions I asked as we were going through House Bill 96 and that budget finalization was, how many 90% can the Loveland community support? So that's, still waiting for that answer. It's something that we're going to continue to talk about, specifically in special education. Some of my testimony included that we pay over 92% for special education students locally. And I just don't think that's acceptable. I don't think anyone in this room thinks it's acceptable for some of our, students with the most needs. So something that we're going to continue to push the legislature and also the state for, to make sure that we're adequately funded for special education. There's been a study that's been done on that. We have not seen the release of that. I don't think anyone probably wants to see the release of it because it's fairly sad in terms of the support we're getting. So we're going to continue, again, telling our story and engaging our lawmakers just to make sure that those students' stories are told. When we look, again, we're a guarantee district. I've adjusted these slides to what the current guarantee means for us. It's the blue section, so we could not function without that blue section, which is the guarantee, which is why we were so adamant about continuing to request that support. We were able to get that with House Bill 96 to keep that guarantee untouched, and also get some additional funding for being a high achieving district. Every district got a little bit more. We got more because of, even more than that, because of the high achieving status that we have. When we look at administrative cost per pupil, which is another component of what House Bill 96 really started to outline, was to create a cap of 15% of total expenditures on admin. When you look at ours, based off of last year's CUP report, you can see we're fourth from the bottom. Both over here, and you can see the average, we're coming in right here, 15, 18, and then over here, you can see it kind of in table view. So I know people like to see things differently, both visually and in tables. So we're ranked 19th out of 22 in Hamilton County for admin costs. One thing that I took a look at was year-to-date versus last year-to-date for the same time period, which is through September. We're actually trending lower in supplies for admin costs. This is good because within that supply cost, those are things like textbooks and digital curriculum. But even with the inflationary pressures that we've seen, we're actually coming in a little bit below. I'm imagining that's going to continue as we go, because a lot of times the administrative supplies occur early on in the school year and they taper off as we go. So for what that's worth, I thought that was an interesting stat. So I started doing this, and it sounds like a very simple thing, but I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and they're like, "Oh, we wish we would have thought of to do something like this." But I keep a running total of everything that is affecting expenditures and everything that is affecting revenues from forecast to forecast. So some things that occurred: salaries and benefits are below trending lower. Because of the STRS retirement, and I said likely, I mean, I think we all pretty much know that that's really what that was, but STRS retirement changed from 33 to 32 years, and then again, how we were replacing our staff and all the thought that Mr. Collier does with Mr. Broadwater on how we're going to replace and what we need to replace and what we don't. We also started using school fee accounts that are lowering the expenditures from the general fund for building supplies. Also, when we look at the actual elections of benefits, those are lower, and that was something that I had pointed out in May as well. I carried this forward in the forecast. I do know that the current loss ratio is a little bit higher than we had seen thus far through this point in the year, the last several years. So going forward, I did increase the increases in benefits, which is the second largest expenditure that the district has. And then county auditor expenses are trending a little bit higher. We did see some delinquencies and taxes. And when those happened, that was in the first settlement of this year. Now we've had the second one and those have been collected. So when those collections happen, the county auditors actually had to go out and, seek out those delinquencies. So that's why those auditor expenses are trending a little bit higher. When we look at revenues, House Bill 96 provided modest increases. I think the thing to think about, if we were to put it into total revenues, this year we received a 0.8% increase when we put it into perspective of total revenues. Next year we're going to see a 0.3% increase in total revenues. Investment income is leading to an increased projection for investments, so I've adjusted that up. Sims Township, and I just want to say Sims Township, they're a great partner, and we've really opened up our communication the last year with the administrator there, Mr. Pittman, and his staff. It's just been really, really great to get to know him and work together, but we've now got everything caught up with that TIF. We actually had our second payment that we received last week. So now we have all other revenues fully loaded with that TIF as we would expect, and then the property taxes have actually come down a little bit to adjust for that coming out of property taxes and not being in the TIF. Medicaid reimbursement for fiscal year 24 was not received. It was received in 25. So what I've done is basically looked forward to expecting that reimbursement a little bit later, and we'll adjust that if that changes. So just kind of looking at that trend. Really what it comes down to here is the blue are the revenues, the gold is the expenditures, and then we have the line that starts to fall as the expenditures start to take over the revenues. Keep in mind from last forecast, there's an additional year now. We did just have 2029 in the far right, now 2030 is out there. We do still have positive cash, albeit we would have some definite cash flow issues somewhere, starting at the beginning of 2029 through 2030, should this play out. Another way to look at it, you can see the expenditures start to overtake the revenues between fiscal year 26 and 27. And that's again, this trend is continuing from what I had shown you before. Just another way to look at that. When we look at fiscal year 26, we're expected to have revenue over expenditures or exceeding expenditures, which you'll see in the green. In the red, we start to have expenditures overtake revenues, leading to deficit spending from fiscal year 27 all the way through fiscal year 30. This might be a good time to pause for a second. Are there any questions?
And your projection is accounting for no changes in state funding, even though they're only budgeted out for 2 more years?
Correct. Correct. So essentially increase this year, increase next year, then flat one after that.
John, more just a comment on the revenue overview on page
17?
5 of the forecast. It may just be worth a comment. You say it on the next page about the levy, but it may just be worth, when you talk about the revenue increase over the last 5 years being at 4.13%, and then you say it's projected to be at 1.1. I think it's probably just worth calling out again that the levy went in and was passed in May of 23, so the first 24 had a half of that, and so people understand that 4.13 a little more.
Yeah, and so
which you have in here, but might just be worth calling out in the comments.
okay.
Yeah.
So again, as Mrs. Megan stated, so the levy revenue started ramping up in 24 and 25, and then you'll notice here I put this green line in here just to show how it flatlines after that. So that phase in, we've now felt that phase in, which leads to that 4% number, and now it's gonna flatline, leading to that 1% number.
Right.
Looking at the revenue overview though, local taxes are still the lion's share of our revenue in the green, state sources in the blue, and then all other revenue, which includes our interest revenues, there in the gold. Restricted state aid, I wanted to call this one out specifically because it's declining. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword when we look at this, because this is impacting gifted, student wellness, and economically disadvantaged. And it's going down. However, as I said, our revenues are going up ever so slightly. So these targeted funds are getting lower, but our funds are going up. So like we have more unrestricted funds than we did before. I would like to see, more unrestricted funds and more restricted state aid to be able to meet the needs of students into this bucket. All other revenue, this one, again, calling this one out just because of the fluctuations. You can see that the Sims Township's TIF is affecting fiscal year 25 as well as the sinking fund disbursement that we had in the fall. So those two together are really leading to that 24 being a little bit lower than we would have expected, and then 25 spiking, and then it kind of leveling back out. So a lot of variance there, but the variance is explainable, and I just want to make sure that we're aware of what that is. Getting into expenditures, 82% are salaries and benefits. That's not uncommon for school districts, because we're a people business. We're developing people with people, and we have a lot of team members that have their specific jobs on how they do that. I will also say about half of the purchase services are also people, because they're contracted with our ESC partners or other vendors that we partner with that are local. When we look at the gold section, again, supplies, we really don't have the capital expenditures that come out of the general fund, or really debt that comes out of that general fund. It's mostly supplies, and then the other uses, which is going to be the 800 objects, which are typically audit fees that come out. When we look at the expenditure overview, the insurance rate projected increases are 6.32 from an historic 5.52. That's because I typically, with what I'm seeing, I went up to 8%, and then in the final year, 10%, just to kind of hedge where we're looking at in terms of our insurance and the volatility. Staff and step percentage increases are actually down from 4.05% to 3.8%. Again, that's due to the staffing projections that we've been doing, and the staffing replacement that we've been doing, as well as the retirements. Supplies and tracking up slightly. Again, this is really tied to, in supplies, I know I talked about administrative supplies. These are all supplies now. They're up slightly, and that's due to the curriculum refreshes that we have planned this year and beyond. Again, I like to put this in here twice. We talk about it at the beginning. I like to kind of bring it up at the end. This is really what it comes down to. We could talk about each individual piece that makes this up, but it really comes down to the expenditures and revenues and what the cash balance is doing. One thing I'm really excited to be doing is doing a cash balance study. I have 5 interns this year, student interns, and so we're going to be working on really a deep dive into investments and also the cash flow. So this forecast, once hopefully approved this evening, will allow me to project cash flows to then go back to our investments and make sure that we're in the best possible place for the district in terms of investments and the liquidity that we need to be able to pay our bills. Days cash on hand, you can see this is the current forecast. The 90-day cash balance policy is in effect for 28 because we're at 90 or below. When you look at the May forecast to this forecast, this is probably the slide I'm most proud of. It shows that the May forecast was very, very, very close to this forecast, and now we're seeing two forecasts with all the analytics really getting us really, really close to what we expect is going to happen in the future, with 3 days difference in 25, 2 days projected this year, and then on. So when we look at the forecast and fiscal stressors, it's a little bit unclear of what, how these are going to be looked at from the auditor of state and the state of Ohio. There are now indicators. I believe there's 16 indicators. We haven't really seen any information be released on how those indicators are going to be applied. But what we can see here is between fiscal year 26 and 27, we start having negative percentages, which we would expect as the expenses take over the revenues. This is actually comparing the May forecast and the October forecast. The May forecast is going to be the gray dotted line. The black line is going to be the current forecast. So again, no surprises. It's really, really close to what we expect. Also, just want to end with this. So we do a lot of data dives. I know Mike does a lot on his own. I do a lot on my own, and Garth as well, and we get together and kind of talk through what we notice. This is a slide that we continue to be very proud of when we're looking at performance index, which is actually being shown on the y-axis, and then the x-axis is the operating expenditures per pupil. We are, in Hamilton County, no one spends less and achieves more than we do. So this is just an awesome visual for me to be able to see that we're in that top left quadrant where we want to be, which is showing us we're achieving at a high level, but we're below the average in that area, which is, again, Hamilton County. As I said before, people like to see the visual, people like to see the data table, so this is the data table showing us that we're at 102 in terms of the performance index, but 13,116.04. Now, if I was watching this or if I was listening, I would say, well, you just said that our expenditures per pupil were 15,000, and now this is 13,100. Those numbers are different because they're ranked differently and they're used differently in terms of the state average to the report card. It's actually slightly different measure than the CUP report or the annual financial report as it's called now. So keeping those in mind, those are different measures, but still showing us in the bottom 6 within Hamilton County in terms of expenditures, but very high in terms of performance index. And then just expenditures per pupil, getting back to that 15,419.74 amount. I think we rounded up to 15,420 on all of our materials that we put out in the spring. Knock off the 2 decimal points, but again, below the average. And then again, table view, still below the average. So very, very good things, just showing all the thought that we're putting into making sure that we're getting our staff and students everything they need to be successful in the classroom, but also doing it on a budget and making sure that we're continuing to monitor that budget. Just want to give a selfless plug again for Finance Friday. We fired that back up, so they're going to be coming every other week, and probably some data, or not data, but just some quick facts that we can put out in the off weeks as well. So happy to get that. And then helpful links, this takes you to the past forecast and then the website, treasurer website, and Any
that's-
questions?
This will go out so that anyone can see it too.
Yeah, I'll put this on the website. There's a spot under, I think there's actually just a forecast spot under documents that we'll put that in.
Did you have any comments, Dr. Spencer?
No, I think that the themes that we keep hitting on are the same over and over, which is there's uncertainty in the budgeting process from the state, more costs are being pushed back to local, and fewer and less support for the most expensive and hard to educate students has been the constant theme since I've been here. It's just, it's disheartening to see, and I know that we're doing everything that we can to reverse it. We've had some wins over where they initially came out, but I think the community needs to realize that we're responsive to the situation that we're given, rather than willy-nilly spending their money. And I love the slide that, I used to make sure that Mike would present it at every meeting. Like, we spend less and we do better. And that's really all you can ask.
Yeah, I also want to point out there are some legislative items that are coming up here soon that are being evaluated and looked at by our legislature that could have a negative impact on us. They're not represented in the forecast because they aren't in law yet.
Right.
So I do want to point out that I believe it's House Bill 136, talking about capping the inside millage growth. So when we look at that, I think a lot of people might think, well, that growth, you didn't expect it. Well, we actually did expect it. It's in the forecast. I'm forecasting triennial updates. I'm also forecasting reappraisal years, and all of that also brings in that inside millage. So it's not just a windfall that the district gets that we weren't planning for. So I do want to make that clear, that those things do affect us. And they also affect our municipal partners too. The city would be negatively impacted by that type of change as well. I was on the legislative call today, multitasking with the audit that we're working through right now. And that was a big topic of discussion. Some things that are positive for us right now is that we're not a 20 mil floor district. Because there's a lot of uncertainty for 20 mil floor districts right now with the legislation that's been passed. And also the types of levies that those districts can run in terms of emergency or substitute and all those things. So I won't get into all that because it doesn't really affect us right now. But they are things that I think are playing into the climate right now. And I'm concerned about our funding, but I also have found, and I found during the House Bill 96 process, that we have to come to common ground and talk with one another. And a lot of it is educating our legislators about what what the effect is of changing the legislation or proposing new legislation. So happy to continue to do that. I think I learned a lot during the spring. It's the most active I've ever been during a budget process before. And I heard a lot of my colleagues say that today too, that they were very happy to see how many people were involved. So hopefully we'll keep that.
Good.
I appreciate you managing the detail on the day-to-day and then bringing us back up to the big picture. So, we'll continue to monitor it and continue to advocate.
Thank you.
And I appreciate how clear and concise everything is, and it's very understanding. I think that the public feels, I've heard that from a number of people in the community, if I can speak. So, appreciate that too.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, okay, so I'd like to request that the treasurer CFO recommended the board approve and accept the October financial forecast and assumptions as presented. If I could have a motion.
So moved. Second?
All right, we have a roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchnow?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Jeranek?
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan?
Yes. All righty, okay, well, our final item is meeting adjournment. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Do you need somebody to?
Do we get a first and second?
Oh,
So
sorry,
moved.
sorry.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, at
She was eager.
6:30, the meeting is adjourned.